From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the African Middle East Division. I'm Mary Jane Deeb, Chief of the Division, and I'm delighted to see you here to attend this exciting presentation by Professor Itai Joseph Tamari, the Director of the Central Archives for Research on the History of the Jews in Germany, which is in Heidelberg, on a fascinating subject, the transformation of the Talmud from manuscript to printed text. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing, the title is not quite that way. This will be followed by a very special display of rare editions of the Talmud, which your program says is a unique opportunity to compare rare editions, page by page. I always say a few things about this division before we start the program. Many of you already know that this division is made up of 3 sections. The African section, which covers the sub-Saharan Africa, the Near East section, which covers the whole of the Arab world, Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, the Caucasus, and smaller areas, even close to China. We are responsible for 78 different countries and regions in those areas, and we are very active in collecting, acquiring, developing collections in the vernacular, in the languages of those regions. We also do briefing for visitors when they come to the library. We do symposia, workshops, we have displays, we have exhibits, and our staff is one of the best staff we can possibly hope to have. They're scholars in their own rights. They know the languages, they know the culture of the regions that they cover. And so we serve our patrons in many ways, one of which is, of course, to serve them with our collections. But we also bring scholars to the library, as we are doing today. We bring scholars who can illuminate and enhance our understanding of those collections that we hold and that we treasure. So it's so exciting to have Professor Tamari here with us today. And to introduce today's lecture is Professor Michael Brenner, the Director of the Center of Israel Studies at American University in Washington, D.C. He's also a professor of Jewish history and culture at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich. So I think you want to hear from them now. And so Professor Brenner, will you please come? There.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to introduce my dear colleague, Dr. Itai Tamari. Let me first thank the Jewish Studies program at American University and also the Judaic Studies program at George Washington University, and of course the Library of Congress, who cooperated in making this possible, especially Ann Brenner, who helped us so much here. I am very happy to see Dr. Tamari here, who was my colleague in Munich for many years until he moved to Heidelberg earlier this year to direct the center, to direct the archives for research and study of the Jews in Germany, the major archives for this purpose in the German-speaking world. He is best known, I think, for his many publications on Hebrew print, the history of Hebrew print, especially in the Ashkenazi world. I would say he is probably the leading expert in this field today. Has published many books. One very beautiful recent book came out about the Hebrew holdings of the Bavarian State Library, one of the leading libraries actually in this field. In fact, the only completely extant medieval Talmud manuscript is in Munich, and many other manuscripts and early prints. He has also published numerous articles on Hebrew printing and related topics in Hebrew, in German, in English, and has been a lecturer in several universities in Germany and in Israel. Recently gave a lecture series at the National Library in Jerusalem, and I am really very happy to see him here, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Tamari, who will speak about the topic I think you all see in the front of you on your screen, From Manuscript to Printed Text, the Transformation of the Talmud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for all the institutions that made it possible to be here in this wonderful and amazing place of where knowledge is at home, so to say. What I'm trying to do in the coming hour or so is to give here in front of you a kind of introduction to the theme, and then I will invite you all to come with me to the room in the rear here and see a very fine selection of Talmud volumes that are presented here, I think so for the first time, one may say, in such a yeah. Okay, let's start. The Talmud is considered the cornerstone of Jewish oral law, which is traditionally comprehended as a corpus that should not be transferred into written form. The Talmud is composed of citations from the Mishnah, followed by the Gemara, which consists of the discussions of the sages relating at times loosely to the pre-cursory citation. When and to what extent the Talmud was copied or written down is unknown. Unfortunately, there are not too many manuscripts of Talmud treatises that have survived to our day, much less manuscripts that contain the whole corpus of either the Yerushalmi, originated in the land of Israel, or the Bavli in Babylon. The persecution of the Talmud by the church is another cause for the disappearance of many Talmud manuscripts and printed versions. Nevertheless, in the following minutes, I will try to discuss the transformation of the text from its handwritten version to its printed version. I would also like to follow some of the prevalent verbal stereotypes concerning the topic and compare them with the material reality of the vast corpora of literature called the Talmud, which is the amplest and the most complicated Jewish tradition ever created. The Talmud is also probably the first multi-layered text in a tradition that after the Renaissance and an invigoration wrought by its printed version could no longer be read linearly. Generally, Jewish communities are considered learned societies. Apart from dealing with the traditions of learning, disputing, ruminating on, and transmitting various kinds of knowledge, we may as well turn our attention to the preparation, production, and dissemination of printed books through which knowledge was kept and transferred. During the first period of the new technology of printing with movable letters, that is incunabula, crafted between about 1415 until 1500, approximately 28,000 to 30,000 titles were printed, mostly in 3 European centers, Italy, Germany, and France. Of those, some 140 were set with Hebrew letters, then 0.5%. Of the 140 titles using Hebrew letters, the biggest section was biblical text and their commentaries, something like 38%. Less than 5% of printed Hebraica of this period were Talmud treatises, but the low percentage of printed Talmud treatises does not provide binding evidence of the poor interest in this kind of literature. Rather, it speaks to the practical hardships of printers in finding appropriate manuscript copies and matching proper and suitable commentaries, as well as the elaborate and arduous way parts of text were set on the printed page, or better saying, the double spread. We will see all these later in the rare room. In 1936, Walter Benjamin wrote his essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. In it, he argues, among other things, that through the act of reproduction, the significance is taken from the original by changing its context. The former aura of the hand-manufactured object gets lost amidst the multitude of reproductions and the deliverance of the reproduced work of art from its symbiotical dependence on ritual. Such are among the most known citations from his essay that later had a considerable influence on the Frankfurter Schule. Well, concerning the printed Talmud after Bomberg, most of the arguments Benjamin brought up tend to show exactly the opposite. Through the printing of the Talmud, Jewish tradition and its ritual components were restructured, strengthened, and standardized. Learning and ruminating on its knowledge became an obligatory activity. The artisanal quality of the Talmud manuscripts disappeared, but the student of the texts became part of a big, hard-to-quantify society of daily students of a modern ritual. Volumes of the printed Talmud became, if not holy, at least venerated and took a central place on the shelves of the living room of every learned Jewish adult. Since the 16th century, the Talmud has possessed, one may say, a practical aura of essentiality that was not feasible before. In this way, two polar opposites approach each other. The ruminative individual struggle with the text approaches the mass learning of it in quantities never known before. Another point of interest that may strike our attention is the vicinity of those texts to technology. From 1520 Venice to our day, with the still new translations of the whole text, now the Talmud can be read on our cell phones and tablets and so on. Compared with texts of other religions, it is most unique. These and other peculiarities of the printed Talmud made it almost from its earliest days a longed-for goal for printers who were, in many cases, during the long history of printing with Hebrew letters, themselves devout scholars. Of the some 15 known completed editions of the Talmud, as well as numerous partial publications, one can assume a very active and highly professional field where there are fascinating efforts to innovate, improve, and squeeze more content into the limited frames of the double spread on both levels, the textual and the physical typographical. Within less than a century, the printed Talmud set new standards for the Jewish tradition and modified it in an essential way. The study of the Talmud in its new version, the printed model, gave almost every interested person the opportunity to encounter it independently and study it without a mediator. Beyond that, since then, there has been much easier access to different bodies of information, that is, adjutants, commentaries, and so on, that accompany the Talmud's main text, making the need to travel to study with learned devotees or see scarce manuscripts obsolete for most readers and users of the printed Talmud. Through the act of printing, the immense text lost a considerable quantity of intrinsic variations. Subsequently, parts of texts that did not confirm the commentaries of Rashi and the following Tosafists were neglected and eventually vanished. Further phenomenal losses of Talmud text were those of the tradition circulating in the Iberian Peninsula during the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and subsequently Portugal from 1492 to 1496. Most of the manuscripts, as well as printed treatises from these area and region, did not survive. The Sephardic tradition of studying the Talmud, particularly in its printed version, came to us in a diminished, incomplete form. The first generation of printers and their printed efforts scarcely succeeded beyond their own lifetime. Members of the Soncino family succeeded with printing during the 16th century. Two descendants succeeded even longer, but it was a Christian merchant from Antwerp that, through enormous investments in money and manpower, managed to publish in Venice more than 250 titles of books printed with Hebrew letters. Among others, the publications included the Mikraot Gdolot and both of the Talmudim for more consecutive editions. To start with the cliché, the Talmud is referred to us as an ocean because of its monumental volume and the immense numbers of themes mentioned and discussed, among other things. Let us have a look at the means that grant that ocean its form and lay its boundaries. The next stage of our consideration concerns the outer form of the double spread of the Talmud. Okay, this is what was mentioned before. This is the most famous complete manuscript of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, called Code Hébreu 95, which was written in France 3042. In systemizing the whole text, students of the Talmud could study the text more easily and profoundly than they ever could in its handwritten version. As long as the Talmud was handwritten, the different parts of its contents, the Mishnah, Gemara, Rashi, and Tosafists, were not always set clearly apart, nor were they always written separately from other texts, let alone written on the same surface. The fact that those texts were sometimes interleaved has to do with those who read or prepared the manuscripts already being acquainted with the full-length texts and therefore preparing the new version to function as a commemoration. Another development one may find in the later 12th century in the same three European centers of printing was manuscripts, or so-called multi-layer books that gifted craftsmen created using varying page layouts and different forms of diverse text clusters. Let us have a short look at it. Here you see a manuscript which was written in Segovia, Spain, containing one of the books of the Bible, and you can see that the copyist played with various layers of texts, of commentaries, and so on. They are not functional, these layers, but you can see it was a known tradition. Another sample coming from Vienna. Since the 13th century, the Catholic jurisprudence in Italy had used a multi-layer double-spread design for penning the codices of the church law. Here you have one of the famous, oh, I'm sorry, it got a bit lower. It is a very known manuscript of the Catholic law, which gives you an impression how Catholic law texts were written down in the 14th century. A similar multi-layer design of a printed page was later used in Spain to print the Complutensian Polyglot Bible. Here you have it. It was printed in 3 years, and you may see that, yeah, Hebrew, Latin, you have here the Aramaic translation. There were some of the conditions before the first printed. These were the conditions before the first printed Talmud treatise. The first attempts to print the Talmud treatise tried to structure the reading surface. This effort is neither new nor appears primarily in the Jewish tradition. It is rather one of the intrinsic qualities of printing texts. The appearance of fully functional multi-text fields is in Jewish texts like the Talmud or the Bible, the Mikraot Gdolot, is a genuine innovation. Here, one can read the main text on the same page, compare it with other text adjutants, thus commemorating the oral tradition in which the Talmud was brought up and evolved. The printed Talmud, as a cultural phenomenon, is one of the rarest idiosyncrasies. Its main textual components are still unconsolidated, whereas its format, the layout, even the exact positioning of the wording are already fixed. This is a page of the Soncino. It is believed to be the first dated treaty of the Talmud, Treaty Nida. Was printed in Soncino 4084 and then again in Pesaro. And this is our jewel, the Bomberg printing. The Soncinos were the first to use the known multi-field layer of the double spread called the Talmud, but various obstacles, above all finances, hindered them from fulfilling their father's wish, namely printing the whole Talmud. The Treaty Nida regarding a menstruating woman is considered the first dated Talmud treatise. It was first printed 4084 in Soncino, and for the second time in 59 in Pesaro. It served as the prototype for the later Bomberg Talmud. Daniel Bomberg, a cloth and art merchant, was a religious Calvinist who was sent by his family to Antwerp to Venice in 1516. His friend, the apostate Felix Fratensis, taught him Hebrew and advised him to open a printing shop for books in Hebrew. Bomberg did not hesitate to invest immense sums of money and manpower previously unknown in the Jewish world, and opened in Venice a big printing shop that functioned as an editorial office for his future publishing plans. In this shop, he employed dozens of Jewish scholars from all over North Africa, Germany, France, and Italy, who otherwise were not allowed to stay in the Lagoon city. 2 or maybe 3 of them converted to Christianity. Nevertheless, after 4 editions of the Talmud and more than 250 titles, he abruptly left Venice and returned to Antwerp, leaving the printing shop to be distributed among other printers, Marc Antonio Di Gara, Marc Antonio Giustiniani, and Alvise Bragadin. Although his editions consisted of presumably 500 to 1,500 copies each, his publishing activities could not be considered a financial success. Yet, in the Jewish tradition, he is praised as a great minister of the Jews. Therefore, our family, this is the copy that the State Library in Bavaria has. It's a complete set, and it is in a very fresh situation. This is the so-called Giustiniani copy. And this is therefore, it is the best copy that was printed in this time. The Foa family, printers active in Sabioneta and later in Amsterdam, Pisa, Venice, and Torino, printed in 50-53 in Sabioneta an enhanced edition of the Talmud treatise, which is called Masechet Kiddushim, or Marriage Ceremony, edited by the renowned scholar Joshua Boaz ben Shimon Baruch, with Cornelio Adelkind, that worked before with Bomberg as the head of the printing shop. Unfortunately, no further treatise of that kind was printed in Sabioneta. Daniel Bomberg's significant achievements is the printing of the Talmud, which later became the Textus Receptus. It was produced in 4 consecutive editions. Only the first was a complete edition containing 44 Masechtot, or treatises. The other 3 were as follows. The second was contained only 40 treatises, the third 8, and the fourth 33. The wonderful letters in Sephardic style were cut by the famous letter cutter Guillaume Lebet I. Some of his original punches are kept nowadays in the Plantin Moretus Museum in Antwerpen. The year 1520, when the Bomberg Talmud was first printed, could be seen as the annus mirabilis, for in this year, not only the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Lev ben Bezalel, was born, but also this milestone Talmud edition made its appearance. 10 years later, another important student of Jewish knowledge was born in Prague, namely Rabbi Mordechai ben Avraham Yoffe, Baal HaLevushim, who substituted for Maharal in Prague. He would later consider the publishing of the printed Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, which is called the Set Table, compiled by Rabbi Yosef Karo, a trend of leaving the old tradition of learning orally and studying out of books. Later, he would gain his own renown and compose his famous Levush Malchut, meaning garments of the kingdom, to assist those who will still depend on old Ashkenazic tradition. This new way of printing the Talmud was not accepted without opposition. Centuries later, there are still printers, Ashkenazic and Sephardic alike, who object to the Bomberg layout. Nevertheless, they will indicate in their Talmud editions the parallel passage in the Bomberg edition, which has already become the standard. Over the course of the 17th century, all the Talmud editions adapted the Bomberg double-spread style, and that was eventually the multifaceted situation that was known to Rabbi and scholar Shmuel Shraga Feibush Feigenson when he prepared the last monumental Talmud enterprise in recent centuries, the Rom, or better known as the Talmud Vilna. Let us have a few pictures to see. This is the Christian edition of the Talmud made in Basel by Ambrosio Froben, but the man behind it, Zifroni, came from Italy and brought with him letters and the new censored edition. This Basel edition, which is known as the censored edition, was printed in many editions through Europe. Here we come to the Sephardi tradition, and you can see even from the outside that this is another tradition that we do not know so much. The letters look much other than we had before. And as you may see here in Thessaloniki, these are editions that were made for students, young students, so they can read the main text in the main column, and all the Perushim, all the commentaries were set in a shorter form. This is another version of the Talmud that was made in Poland. It used a very small letter in order to let the original text of Bomberg inside, but nevertheless it didn't manage to have the whole commentaries behind. We will see it in the room later. It is a very moving story about this Talmud Bavli that was printed in 15 copies. 500 of them were given to poor students of the Talmud in order that they could read the Talmud and study it in their homes without having to pay for this. This is another edition for students, for young students, in order to read the Talmud in its basic version. And here we come to the modern era, where the known letter called Ot Amsterdam makes its appearance, of which we have to our days. This is what happened as the late emperor of Habsburg didn't let printed books from other places in Europe come inside his reign. Christian printers started to print the Talmud with letters that they could buy in Amsterdam, in other places. One of them was Sulzbach, a very nice example. And this is the last, as I said before, the last enterprise that was done, printing the Talmud in Vilna, which is the new Bomberg, so to say. I would like you now to come with me to the room and have a look at the volumes that we have. And yes.
Okay. On behalf of the Hebraic section, I'd like to thank Dr. Tamar for a wonderful talk. And we do want to invite you back. I hope everyone has a checklist. As you will see, our display is divided into 5 groups. Each group is opened up to the same page, but in different editions. Now, usually when we have a display, I let you all walk around in peace and quiet and enjoy everything. This time, I suggest that we treat this as a master class, and because this is such a wonderful opportunity to have such a scholar to walk around with us and to point out to us the differences in the different editions. So again, warmest thanks to Dr. Tamari, and please use the side doors and come on into the display room. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.